Looks like you're on your computer this time, though. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Okay. Alrighty.
Doesn't look like we're muted.
Now we can hear you. And we're live. We don't get many viewers, only after the fact usually. Got a couple of attendees though, whose names I don't recognize.
The Sprout Lake Community Association AGM happened on Monday night, and it was extremely well participation.
Oh, that's
Over
good.
75 participants, and some of those connections had multiple people, so couples at it. Really well attended.
Great.
Great thanks to the regional district for hosting on their Zoom, and Wendy for helping me with the elections and screen sharing.
Alrighty. 2-minute warning. Oh, we got loads of people coming in. Great.
Hello, Lydia. Hello. Oh, look at that. That's the second time.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Good. Got your good stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Right on. How'd that go? Are you looking at getting the records, or what are you doing?
Just mostly it's start with thinking records, but it's just like some.
Okay. About a minute left. Not even 5 seconds. Okay, I think that's enough to kick off here. So we'll go right at 1:30. So calling to order. I'd like to recognize that we're conducting our business today mostly on the territory of the Hupatchisitt and the Tashot First Nations, but also to recognize that because we're doing so conducting across Zoom, it's very likely we're also on Nuu-chah-nulth and perhaps even Coast Salish territory as well. From there, I'd like to ask that maybe Andrew, if you could go on mute. Anyone who is not currently set to speak, if they could be muted, Janice, that would be great. And we'll go from there to the approval of the agenda. So we have a few items in correspondence for information, but the main thrust of today is the roundtable discussion that we'll be having. And so that if you're able to get to the website under today's date on the calendar, you'll be able to download the package for that. And on the package between pages 1 and 2 are a list of 7 questions that can serve as the basis for your part of a roundtable discussion on the topic of illegal camping. One thing I neglected to say at the very beginning is that we're being broadcast live on YouTube and we're being recorded as well. But any citizens who are not taking place as panelists in today's Committee of the Whole meeting will be able to send in their questions and comments at responses@acrd.bc.ca. And at the end of the meeting, we'll be checking that email address for any comments or questions. If you are an attendee in the meeting, and I see that there's a couple, you're also able to send in questions through the Q&A comments section in Zoom's functionality, just at the center there. That'll go to the hosts, and then they can send the questions our way as panelists. Okay, once again, welcome. And we do have the agenda in front of us. I don't think we have anything else to add to the agenda. Director Roberts, would you like to move the agenda? All right, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cole. All right, with that in mind, does anyone have any comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Alrighty, motion carried. All right, that brings us to item 3, which is correspondence for information. We have a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Josie Osborne, regards to the BC Parks Plan for 2021 camping, and an AVICC resolution submission for the unauthorized camping crisis. Would anyone like to speak to these items? If not, we can have a motion to receive those 2 items for information. Thank you, Director McNabb, seconded by Director Cole. Comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All righty. So that brings us to the roundtable discussion. So it's my hope that we have plenty of folks here and a long list of potential stakeholders who are in attendance. I'm going to go through them in the order that they're listed in our package. So once again, you can download the package at acrd.bc.ca and then click on today's date. Dr. Roberts, please go ahead.
Yeah, firstly, I think we missed 3B. Do we need to receive that report as well?
Oh, no, we just received them both. They're all under correspondence for information. So unless anybody wanted to pull anything out, did you want to speak to it, Director Roberts? No? Okay. Okay, so we have a list of 7 questions, and quite a few people or organizations that we can call on to perhaps do a commentary on. So I'm going to read out some of the questions first, or all of the questions first, just as a way for folks to prepare for the roundtable, and then we'll go through and do a roundtable discussion. What I'd like to do, I think, is that we'll go through the stakeholders first, and then on to the directors, just in order. And unless any of the directors have like a hard stop time, then we can have a discussion about that. That would be something we can do pretty quickly. So if anybody has to get out of here sooner than later, then please let me know on the director's side. So we're here to have a discussion about illegal camping and the difficulties that it's been causing across the regional district. And so in order to kind of add some structure to the roundtable discussion that we're hoping to have, I would like to read out some questions that we have in front of us. So the first of which is, how has your agency been affected by the unauthorized campers? 2, what challenging behaviors and effects have you observed, and what makes those behaviors challenging? So is it safety or environmental concerns, that kind of thing? 3, what beneficial effects or activities have you observed? 4, what actions do you think should be pursued? 5, do you have the authority to take that action, i.e. do you have the regulatory role? If not, who do you think does? And number 6, will the reopening of provincial campsites improve the situation? And 7, what else do you think is important to add to this conversation from your perspective? So I have plenty of folks who are online now. If you're going to speak, I do have the attendees open, so you should be able to raise your hand, but there may be a delay because sometimes I won't notice them. The best way to speak is probably make your video visible and then just start waving. It's usually the best way it happens with me. Okay, we do have a list of stakeholders, however, and it might be a bit painful, but I'm going to go through them in the order that they're presented on the page. And if no one is here at that time, we'll give it a good couple seconds, and then we'll go to the next one. So we have quite a few First Nations up front. Is there anybody from the Heshquiet First Nation? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone from Ahousaht? Alrighty. Anyone from Tlaoquiet? Nope. Toquat. Kristen, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Do you have any input on behalf of Toquat?
We've had some issues, not directly out at Macoa, but just on our lands. There's been campers, and we've had patrols over the summer, spring, summer, and we've provided people with information that our territory is closed, and we haven't had any issues, like no one's pushed back or anything. yeah, I'm just curious what's happening around us as well.
Okay, I would note as a treaty nation, you do have the authority to enforce your own territories, regulations, and whatnot. Have you run into any issues or difficulties with that?
No, we're in a state of emergency. We have been since March, and we do it weekly. And so we have orders, executive orders out of that. But we're mainly focusing on just trying to have outsiders just leave our land. And we haven't had any issues. What we're mainly trying to do is protect Makoa. So we have more restrictions at Makoa specifically and our marina.
Okay.
We're contemplating opening the marina, but that is still under discussion for this summer. So we have the ability to give tickets. We haven't done that yet, but if it gets worse, we'll start. It's just getting people out there to actually hand out the tickets.
That sounds pretty familiar to me as well. And it's work that Monolith, all 5 of the treaty nations on the West Coast, we work together in a treaty society, and we do co-develop enforcement arrangements as well. And we're still in the process of working on that, so they're not entirely all buttoned up. All right. Was there anything else, Kristen?
No, not right now.
All right, thank you, Director Johnson. All right, that brings us to the Uklufafat. I'm wondering if, oh, it doesn't look like he's here. Dr. McCarthy, are you here? No. Okay. District of Tofino. Is there anyone from Tofino here? Thank you. Mr. Baker, please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Brenton, the Fire Chief and Manager of Protective Services. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to sit in for our CAO today. I think if I just kind of quickly go through some of the questions there, first of all, for number 1, this has kept us exceptionally busy out here in Tofino, and having to increase our staffing just to be able to deal with primarily vehicle camping out here is everywhere you turn. And it's been very taxing on the staff for sure. Most of the time when we're addressing the issues, it's first thing in the morning, 6:30 or 7, before the people are getting up and moving on. They're basically camp for the night and try and get up before they get caught, and then move on and surf for the day or whatever they're doing, and then find a quiet spot again at night. So when they are approached in the mornings, typically they're angry and they're aggressive, and a lot of them tell you that no, my friends live here, they told me I was allowed to camp here, and they're stating a lot of misinformation, which makes it really, really challenging. Haven't found any beneficial effects of all the illegal camping yet, but actions that we are pursuing. Last year alone, we issued close to 600 tickets for vehicles used for accommodation. Historically, we're maybe 50, 60 a year, but last year was exceptional, and we're already into about 40 already for this year. So it's a regular thing for us. Our intention is to increase the fines right now. The starting fine is $160, and we're looking at bumping that up as well too, as well as improving signage. We do have the authority to enforce that out here. And I think question about will reopening the provincial campsites make much difference? In our particular situation, I don't believe that it'll make any difference. Mostly what we have is not people saying they can't find space in campgrounds, but people choosing to come out and use their vehicles as their preferred accommodations. So I don't think it would matter how many additional campsites we opened. There would still be a huge percentage of this population traveling out here for that specific purpose. So it's definitely been challenging, and it's a daily thing. We have a morning patrol every day right now for illegal camping.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that brings us to item G, the District of Ucluelet. Anyone from Yuki? Hi,
Hi,
Donna.
good afternoon. Hi, my name is Donna Monteith, and I'm the acting CAO for the District of Ucluelet. I think I would mirror a lot of what Mr. Baker or what Chief Baker is saying with the vehicle camping. It was a very common occurrence for us last year. And I think also people definitely choosing to stay in their vehicles as opposed to using some of the campgrounds. We had heard that there often were spaces in campgrounds that were available, but people were choosing to stay in their vehicles. So same thing, you know, bylaw drives through and in the morning, in the evening, and they're kind of moving around town, and lots of complaints from residents about people using the washroom in their front lawns and leaving toilet paper and whatnot around. So a lot of that kind of thing. We are currently trying to fill our vacancy for bylaw right now as we ramp up for the summer. So it's certainly a concern for us. I do see Councillor Cole is here today, and certainly she's got the eye on Ucluelet, but also with her medical background over the summer, she may have more to add as well. But that would be my comments right now. Thank you.
Thanks, and thank you for reminding me. Director Cole, if you have anything, and then we're going to go back. Tom, I didn't see you there, so I wouldn't mind going back and having you chime in. Director, please go ahead.
Like Ms. Monteith said, my perspective was a little bit different because although we did have the issue in town, I had the experience of responding to calls on West Main, which was sort of the primary logging road concentration of the backroads campers that I was privy to. And very distressing scenes, very environmentally damaging, very non-social distancing, very people have the right to live at risk, but certainly it does make a big difference responding to a call in, you know, when you already are at a deficit of, you know, 25 minutes down a logging road with no precise street corner or street address, and they've already had to drive out 15 minutes to get cell reception. So the delay in response to something is, I wouldn't say anxiety provoking, but certainly does add an added stress to first responders when you know you're already going into it with something that was time sensitive, and you've kind of lost that time right off the bat. So there are sort of many aspects, whether it's from the first responder aspect or the environmental aspect, just health and safety in general, especially in our pandemic situation. When I think about what was the benefit of that, on a really, really sad note, I guess if there was no West Main, there'd be more of them on Main or Peninsula or Helen Road or First Street, or if they didn't have that place to go to, because they certainly weren't, they by definition were not coming here as our typical tourists to utilize our, you know, our accommodations, our facilities in any sort of regular basis. They were certainly here to live in their vehicles. And just the pollutant factor was something that really struck home. And I think the backroad cleanup was indicative of that this year and what they were faced with when they did that. So my perspective is certainly sort of what was happening more outside of the communities. And it was the most devastating thing I've seen. We've always had on the back roads, we've always had a certain amount of that over decades and decades and decades. It's not new, but there was a massive concentration of it this summer, or last summer. And I do believe a lot of it based on license plates and, you know, Quebec and Ontario, and that they were definitely people that came across the country right about the same time as the CERB was happening. So I don't think that did us any favors. So I don't know if we're going to see any change in that, being that kind of money isn't being handed out this year under COVID, under the COVID spectrum. So yeah, I'll just, I'm sure Tom has things to add, but mine is definitely on a first responder perspective. And just anytime Ucluelet, Tofino has two ambulances, and most of the time they only have one because one's doing transfers, and Ucluelet only has one. So if we're half an hour down a logging road searching for somebody at no fixed address, that leaves everybody in the community, you know, at risk for things, and everybody deserves a response, and it is in our catchment to do so. It just really elevates that kind of illegal camping, really elevates everybody's risk on the West Coast.
Okay, So just to confirm, and we'll go right to Tom after this, it sounds like there's definite health and environmental concerns that you've seen. Without getting into any privacy details, would you say that there's also safety concerns? Are there injuries as well as health emergencies that are resulting in this?
I can comment that injuries weren't what I saw. It was illnesses, drug-induced illnesses, overdose, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Dr. Steer, sorry for skipping you over. It just skipped my mind. Please go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Chief Baker echoed many of the comments that I was going to. I would just add that some of the challenges that his bylaw department were exasperated. I think there was a slightly different clientele than was used to. That this issue is a long-standing issue, but the volume and the type of people that the bylaw were encountering posed more challenges, and certainly I know that had been echoed to council, and one of the actions that we have done for this year's budget year, we have increased bylaw services exponentially in terms of the funding mechanisms that are necessary to provide those services. I would also like to echo very much Director Cole's comments about the work that that had to be pursued out at West Main. I do really want to comment, though, that the traditional territory is where most of that land sits on Tlokoyat's territory, and that they were heavily involved as well through the Tribal Parks Allies, and their voice is a very important voice in that particular part of our jurisdiction moving forward. So not much more to add other than to echo that about Director Cole and Chief Baker in terms of the resources that were allocated towards the servicing of the issues of the unauthorized camping last year.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. And once we get through the whole list, then we'll go to the directors and have kind of more of a free-ranging conversation. But I just want to make sure we get through all the stakeholders in good time first. Okay, next up we have the Tofino and the Ucluelet RCMP. So is there a representative of Tofino or Yuki for the RCMP?
Hi, it's Steve Mancini here with the Ucluelet RCMP.
Okay, there we go. We can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for including me in the phone call here today. Just in regards to just kind of our input from what we're seeing from our end, definitely a large increase in vehicle traffic last year as compared to years past. As Rochelle had mentioned, we're seeing, you know, our West Main has kind of been our hot spot, so to speak, for just sheer volume of vehicles. Whether it's down West Main or kind of just in the pullouts right off the highway, like it's packed. We've ran roadblocks out there, and you're seeing, you know, in the upwards of 80 to 100 vehicles heading down at any given point of the day or evening. People returning to their campsites or their spots where they've set up for the summer periods. In regards to calls for service, though, we haven't had a large uptick in calls for service out there. We have had a few, as mentioned previously, you know, assisting HS with drug overdoses. But as for crimes, persons crimes, things like that, we haven't had a large uptick in that. We are starting to see just this year, in 2021, some conflicts brewing between local people who are kind of thinking that that's maybe their place to be, and those from outside of area shouldn't have any rights to it. So those are starting to be conflicts that we're starting to see. And as mentioned already, you know, the problem with it is with the limited resources that we have on the West Coast, you start pulling, you know, your only police officers 30, 40 minutes out of town for disturbances, arguments between, you know, local people and people that are out camping. It affects the communities that we're here to provide other services for as well. Localized camping, as mentioned, it's you know, we were fortunate last year with Ucluelet having the bylaw officer engaged. They were on top of it. We'll see. Hopefully, they can get somebody in place here for this summer. In regards to the challenges, the behaviors. You know, it's people have been pretty good when we deal with them. They are aware that they're not to necessarily be there for, especially over the 14 days or whatever they're allotted for camping. However, I just don't think that it's being enforced or anything that's being pushed upon them. And obviously, it's something that we don't have the resources to monitor how long people are at spots and moving them along. So, as for the actions that could be pursued, I honestly don't know. I know it's been talks of gating it and going that route, and I don't know if that's the best bet or what. So that's kind of my thoughts on the situation so far.
All right, thank you very much for that, and hopefully you could stick around for the larger conversation. Looks like the next up we have Parks Canada. So, oh, there you go. Hi, Karen, and welcome.
Hi, John. It's good to be on. Thank you for the invite. For us here in Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, we did experience quite a bit. We were the place where everybody went after they were camping out in the back roads, and they dumped all of their garbage within the park reserve at either our little recycling bin areas or major garbage can areas. They also used all of the washroom facilities for showering, even though there's no showers in them. They use them for showers, for cleaning their garbage, for doing their laundry. It caused quite a bit of issues for us in the sense of destroying or wrecking a lot of our water system. So we had a lot of clogs, we had backlogs, we've had systems failure. So it was a big issue for our maintenance department. Our janitorial team, who would be on site at 6 a.m. half the time, we're dealing with people in these facilities and trying to get them out, or having to deal with some pretty bad behavior. So that ended up bringing law enforcement aboard. So our law enforcement team was dealing with quite a bit of that within the park reserve, as well as people camping or trying to camp in outside areas near these facilities. They would hang out quite a bit in the park reserve almost all day, taking up a lot of the resources, bunching up in areas. Quite a bit of them would not pay park use fees. So we were dealing with not only illegal activities, we were also dealing with none of them wanting to pay park fees or pay any type of fees, getting into confrontation with visitors who were paying and visitors who were around. So we dealt with quite a bit of that. It was more about the after effects. They had nowhere to dump their garbage. They had nowhere to shower, nowhere to do their laundry, and nowhere to really cook. So a lot of that came into our facilities, and they used quite a bit of it that way. Lots of wildlife attractants were left out, causing human-wildlife conflict throughout the year. So that was another big one we had to deal with. One of the benefits, John, we did enhance a guardian program. So we had junior guardian programs with Tlokwiet and Uklulathut. We enhanced the tribal park guardian program with Tlokwiet. And then in our backcountry, we had worked with Sashot Beachkeepers, Ho'ayat, DT and Pachi guardians along the West Coast Trail, so Cape Beale Headlands and Nitnut Narrows. So that was a huge benefit. I would say it really put people on the ground. It gave us more understanding of movement of people. And over the next coming weeks, we'll be looking at final reports to see what the Guardian programs are going to provide us moving forward. That I would say was a benefit. But overall, it was a lot of dealing with maintenance, human-wildlife conflict, illegal activity. It did keep our law enforcement officers busy. We do have the ability to charge people for illegal camping, illegal dumping, no park fees. So we do have mechanisms there, and we did use them quite a bit. We're waiting for our final report as to what that looks like. But realistically, many of them wouldn't pay. They either ripped up their tickets or they walked away. So it's going to be one of those things that we're going to be facing.
Okay, thank you for that. Would you characterize the activity as being centralized on like the park reserve part, or do you see that kind of thing on the entrances to the West Coast Trail as well?
It was not so relevant in the backcountry, John, but there were people in the backcountry. However, the people that were visiting the backcountry, they were actually pretty good at removing their garbage. They were a bit, their etiquette was a little bit more because they were prepared to be out there. They just weren't, they were not to be out there because the backcountry was closed to activity.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. I've been reminded that the Tofino RCMP I may have missed, so please take it away if you're here. I'm sorry, I just don't know who the individual for the Tofino RCMP would be for that report. Okay. Director Cole, I don't know if they're here.
I thought they were under Eric Rochette, I think.
I actually checked with Eric at first, and he's just handling Port Alberni. But if there's anything that you can say, Eric, on behalf of Tofino, that would be great. So, yeah.
Well, good afternoon. So, yeah, unfortunately, our reality, I can really discuss. I think Steve Mancini from Euclid probably have better understanding of what's the reality in Tofino than I do. Because the reality that we're facing in Port Alberni is quite different when you come to illegal camping. So I don't really have more comments in regards of Tofino RCMP or how they could manage everything that's going on the West Coast in regards to illegal camping.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll return to you once the mayor and perhaps anyone else from the city of Port Alberni go up first, and then you can kind of build on that. But thank you for chiming in nonetheless. Okay, so on the list, that brings us next to BC Parks and hopefully Coolest Crisis Services on the West Coast, if at all possible. Is there anyone from BC Parks here?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Grombo. I'm the area supervisor for the Clackwood area for BC Parks. I work out of Tofino, managing everything west of Port Alberni all the way up to Heshquit Peninsula. So my jurisdiction, of course, only extends as far as the park and protected area boundaries, but this year we had an exceptionally difficult time with the illegal camping. Kennedy Lake and the Kennedy Lake West access off of West Main were always busy, extremely, there was so much confrontation, so much non-compliance. You should all know that the BC Park staff out here, we are 2 full-time staff and 1 seasonal park ranger. So as enforcement agents, we really are limited in what we can do with that number of staff. And I was having to send my guys out and myself several times a week just to deal with the illegal camping at Kennedy Lake. And for those of you who don't know, Kennedy Lake boat launch area is actually a day use park. There is no camping whatsoever, whether it be in the parking lot or on the beach. And it was 12 to 15 vehicles a day, predominantly Alberta and Quebec plates, incredibly non-compliant, aggressive. We even had a firearms issue once. And we issued more violation tickets this year, including warnings and actual tickets, more than we have ever in this area. And I'd be willing to gauge that there will be just as many issued this year. And I think it's partly because of people listing these areas as safe places to go on different apps and different blogs. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of these, I would ask people while dealing with them how they heard about Kennedy Lake boat launch. And it was predominantly through blogs and apps, including Go Camping and whatever else. So, or not Go Camping, that's BC Parks, but anyhow, so yeah, lots of challenges, lots of difficulties. I can't say that, I can't imagine how to deal with the West Main issue, because in order for us to get to the second portion of the provincial park, we have to drive down West Main, and I can attest to everything that's been said thus far about the 80 to 100 vans parked along every inch of the Forest Service road was covered in people, dogs running around, pallets on fire. It felt like a third world country. So it was really hard to deal with people who had no understanding of where they were, whether they were within the protected area or not, and just there was power in numbers. So obviously, if there's 60 people standing around you, you're not able to actually enforce anything without feeling harassed and mob rules out there. And that's really, unfortunately, what we were seeing as park rangers. I wanted to also mention something about question number 6. I don't want to jump through everything here, but I also, in the interest of time, I don't want to take up too much of it. But just for clarity, the reopening of provincial campsites. So BC Parks doesn't actually have any campsites on the coast other than on the islands. So Vargas and Flores have backcountry camping opportunities. So too does, Dolly Passage, Epper, and all of the provincial parks. But on the actual peninsula, there is nothing really available as a BC Park campground. So I just wanted to establish that. I do understand that this might have insinuated as well that Clackwood Arm rec site and maybe Snow Creek and those types of areas, they might be what reopening, and that might improve the situation. But just for clarity, there are no BC Parks campsites on the peninsula, and so that I just, of course, wanted to clarify that. And yes, one of the only benefits I'd say that we got out of this experience last summer was just the opportunity to work a little bit more closely with the Taloquit Tribal Park Guardians. I wish that we could have resolved more together, but I think just having conversation and trying to find solutions together, it was beneficial. But I can't take away too many good things from this whole experience. It was really, it depleted my staff, it depleted my resources. I can't imagine doing this again this year. So thank you for your time, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for mentioning what you have. I think there's something actionable in the apps and blogs conversation. I think there are things that we can do at the regional district and just as we are to legally communicate with those companies that run the apps at the very least, if not the blogs, to let people know and clarify what's going on. That can potentially go. With the reports of like dozens and dozens of vehicles on West Main, I think this is something that is starting to become a clear point of focus. So we may return back to that conversation. I think the quotable quote so far is the mob rules out there, and that's never good. So I think that's an important one to note. So thank you for that.
And sorry, just one last thing. I just thought I'd mention, one of my staff members actually went out to West Main this morning to go and check on Kennedy. And there are vans that have been there since October that are still in the exact same place. And these are some of the people who have had contentious issues with some of the Yuki locals, including threats of violence and a very aggressive behavior against these locals who are looking to go recreate. They're blocking entire spurs and refuse to leave and have been threatening violence. So my staff actually saw them this morning, and they are still in the same place they have been since October. So just a little side note, but thank you.
That's all the more important. If these are things that happen long-term and have long-term consequences, it's cumulative impact at that point, right? So
absolutely.
Health, safety, and environmental impact. Because, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Flynn Rowe, or is it called Flynn Rowe now? But we do have.
So it's Jim Norlock here. Thanks everyone. Yeah, and so I'm representing the compliance and enforcement branch. I'm a natural resource officer with the province and work for the The record length ministry name, so the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. So I guess I'll just start off, mentioning how, how has our agency been affected by this? We have received an obvious uplift in complaints and referrals regarding, long-term stays on Crown land, people living on Crown land. I will say that this is something that happens up and down the island, the province as a whole, especially being in the West Coast, where we live in a temperate climate. It's attractive for folks to come and live and set up shop. So camping in itself is a conditional privilege that is permittable within a period of within limits of time, 14 days. But living on Crown land is something that is not in line with the Land Act. Specific to the West Main and some of the things that happened on the coast this past summer, my agency did not do a lot of work when it came to what was happening out there. Being a pandemic and a state of emergency, most of us, myself included, were deployed on a number of occasions to the borders, the U.S. borders, to man some booths. So we didn't have a lot of a contribution to this issue in the area. So, but I did see a lot of information come, and I know Mike was Mike Grandbaugh, BC Parks, provided a lot of information my way, as did some of the others on this call, and it was quite disturbing to see the level of traffic and the type of things that happened out there. Because of what happened last year, I do believe that we can do something or be a role with the enforcement of the Land Act, which is what natural resource officers, I and my team do enforce the Land Act. And I will say that there are challenges with it. It's not it's not a quick fix by any means, but there are tools that I think we can work together to make a difference out there. Some of the items that I did see that were disturbing to me, along the West Main, it did appear to impact industrial traffic at times. There was quite a bit of garbage and debris and whatnot, environmental impacts based on the sheer quantity of folks that frequented the backcountry there. And as a result, I think we should do a little something going forward into this year. And I think what we can do is I'm interested in coordinating something outside of this meeting and having a sort of a working meeting where we can strategize on our approach and a coordinated effort to see what we can do to curb what happened last year.
All right. Thank you for the suggestion of a working group. It does seem like we should focus on that in real sense. All right. We will definitely come back to you. All right. Next up, we have T-Shot. Is there anyone from the T-Shot First Nation? I would note that I've received word that we've gotten a lot of last-minute cancellations. So, going once.
Yeah, there is from T-Shot. This is Jennifer Gallick. I am a council member, and I am just sitting on behalf of Ken Watts, our chief counselor, just as an observer at the moment. We don't have anything that's been an issue so far, but because we have in general public of Port Alberni City, there is an issue that may kind of move towards our lands. So,
all right, thank you, Jennifer. If there's anything, please message me because it looks like you're off video, and then I can put you on the speaking list once we get to that point. Are you a member of council? Is that correct?
Yes, T-Shot Council.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, that brings us to item. The next item is Hupatchisitt. Is there anyone from Hupatchisitt? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Next up, Hochuklassit. Wilfred, are you here?
I'm here, but I'll defer to Ryan and Anaka, and if I need to make any follow-up comments, Ryan's our Director of Lands and Resources.
Thank you very much. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. As Wilfred said, I'm Ryan Anaka, Director of Lands and Resources for the Utchuksta Tribe Government. Appreciate the opportunity to voice some of our concerns that we witnessed in the last summer in our treaty territory. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Utchuksta's treaty territory. It's roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours by terrible gravel roads to Henderson Lake area. And historically, we haven't seen a lot of summer traffic. We see the regular ATVs and the odd campers of the local campers of the area. This summer, there was a substantial increase in traffic in the area. We have a couple spots on the river and the lake that are accessible by gravel road quite easily. We had upwards of 30 people camping at some of these locations at once. We had old growth cedar trees poached, people making floats out of the wood. We had all sorts of human debris and waste throughout our watersheds. We put gates up in some instances just to try to alleviate some of it, especially after one really nice 6 foot through cedar tree disappeared. The stump's there, but the tree's gone. And so we put a gate up, and within 3 days, the gate was already torn out. We have cameras on it. We worked with the RCMP trying to track them down in that instance and weren't able to get to it. We've had another gate where it's so big they can't tear it out, but they glued the locks on us, which has safety concerns because we have a lodge and people are accessing it on the inside of that, so we couldn't get out. So just I think if provincial parks open up, maybe alleviate some of the exploration and use of our territory, but overall there were some substantial concerns, and with the limited capacity we had and COVID, we had to have expenditures of buying new trucks so we could get out there because we weren't allowed to ride in trucks together. We had safety concerns, so we didn't want to send single people out there to investigate these instances on a regular basis. So we had to send 2 trucks. So there's costs to ourselves, the nation, and impacts to the landscape. So there was just, I guess, a substantial increase in people, traffic from pickup trucks to boats, campers. There was a couple motorhomes out there. How they got out there, I have no clue, because you could barely get a pickup truck out there. And impacts to wildlife. We've transferred, and some of you are aware here, we transferred 12 elk to reestablish a population out there from Campbell River a couple years ago. And poaching of those is a concern to us, and so we had to increase our expenditures on tracking and monitoring those. So just overall, there was it is if the same level of traffic from people occurs this year, I don't know how we're going to keep up with it.
Okay, thank you. That's a very concerning report, but it's something that needs to be stated and stated publicly, I think. So thank you for that. Dr. Coots, do you have any supplementals?
No, Mr. Chair, and just thank you to Director Anaka for covering everything so well. Thank you.
Thank you. I would note that you call them directors just like Huayet, which thoroughly confuses me when I call our senior managers here at the ACRD director. We come by it honestly, just for the record. Okay, so thank you for that report. That's definitely something I'd like to return to, because I don't know much about what goes on in Ho-Chuklassit territory and Ho-Chuklassit Lake, and that's something that needs to be kind of at the forefront if we're going to tackle this completely, because I do know that there is activity out there. I just didn't know to what degree that it's impacted your community, your territory, and your resources there. Okay, next up we have the City of Port Alberni, and then the city RCMP. So Director Minions, would you like to start off?
Sure, thank you. Thanks everyone for all the conversation we've had on this already. In the City of Port Alberni, our issue is somewhat different. You know, I would say just because it stems more from homelessness than maybe true camping. But certainly I'm hearing a lot of consistency in some of the challenges that arise from people just camping and living in areas not intended for people to camp and live. So yeah, I won't speak too long because very similar to what other areas are struggling with, but the biggest challenges we've had are people using the bathroom in public spaces, you know, businesses in the area really struggling struggling with safety in some cases, struggling with garbage and things like that. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue that we have is that people are typically camping because there legitimately is nowhere else for them to be. So I think that's the sad reality of where the issue comes from and the biggest problem that we have. Our problem certainly won't be corrected by camping opening, because I think, you know, it's very much stemmed to mental health. But absolutely, I think that, you know, similar in terms of just lack of resources, it really has impacted every single department within the city of Port Alberni in terms of the resources. And very much so, you know, just struggling with, I think, staff knowing how to navigate, you know, when it's okay to clean up belongings and treat them as garbage, when it's okay, when it's not, when you have to save them and things like that. And when a mess is left behind, how do we appropriately deal with that? So yeah, it's been a real struggle for sure. And it's been something that I would say has taken up the majority of our city staff time and focus over the last year. It has gotten increasingly worse. So somewhat of a different issue just in where it stems from, but very similar in terms of the challenges of dealing with it. And Director Paulson might have something to add as well. Thanks.
Thanks. Director Paulson, please go ahead.
You're right. The city is somewhat different, although, you know, we have kind of the illegal camping in behind Walmart and those areas here within the city limit. In the city, it's a bit of a moving target. As we move in with bylaw, they will tend to pick up and go to a different area. The one thing that kind of strikes me, and from the city point of view, the outlying areas, as bylaw bears down on there is a segment of the homeless population that either isn't or don't want to be housed in the shelter, and that group of people has a unique set of problems, whether it be mental issues or health issues or whatever. But to make a long story longer, as we bear down, and I drove out to Great Central Lake the other day to try and find that camp that's out there, I have a feeling that people may be moving from within the city boundaries into the regional district as a result of bylaw enforcement within our own area. I have some questions, and this will be further discussion. I'd like a legal opinion on the legal rights of the campers, no matter where they are, whether they're in national park or whether they're on Crown land. The other thing that really has me through this conversation, that has me really worried, and I almost get a feeling of the Wild West here with lawlessness. And I think hearing some of the people speak today, we're grossly understaffed to deal with this problem. It sounds like the problem was out of control, but some of the things that have really upset me in this conversation is the conversation that there was a firearms issue. We have people attending sites that are overwhelmed by numbers and feel unsafe. Like I say, I don't know. I don't have an answer. And I'm just concerned about this mentality of defiance of bylaw. You write a ticket, they tear it up in front of you, or they just say they're not going to pay it. It's almost like there's a feeling of entitlement, and I don't know what the answer is. And you know, we have our own problems here within the city limits, but I hope that we're not pushing that population out into the outlying areas.
Thank you, Director Paulson. I think one thing we should keep in mind is that the challenges for different communities are going to be different. I mean, obviously, right? But I do think you've underlined an important effect is enforcement well done, or even just done in one area, may have an impact on neighboring or outside areas as well. And I think the challenge is when it comes to different types of illegal camping, should be treated as differently, because it didn't sound like to me that people who are homeless in the Alberni Valley who live here and maybe camping, they're not the ones necessarily creating the firearms issues out at Kennedy Lake or that sort of thing. That sounds like some hunters from outside of our communities, either Alberta or Quebec, have been mentioned. I'm not going to underline that because it could be anyone. But I do think that there's a difference between homeless folks camping in Dry Creek Park from people who are camping on West Main and people who are, you know, somewhere in between. And so I'd like to take a careful measure of how we talk about this issue, because it hits all of the spectrum of people who just don't want to pay for camping to people who are outright homeless and may have mental health issues as well. And I think that was very important for you to say, Dr. Paulson. So thank you for stating that. I would note that Colin unmuted himself, so maybe he has something to add before we get to the RCMP.
No, that's okay. I'm just waiting. I can speak on behalf of Mosaic if you like.
Okay, well, we'll get to the to Eric. Sorry, Inspector Rochette and the RCMP, and then we'll get to you pretty quick. But all right, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to defer to Sergeant Pete Dion, and then I'll add some of my comments.
All right, Pete, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It's Sergeant Dion here. The city of Port Alberni has done a good job with bylaw enforcement, setting up expectations and standards, and being consistent about that, and they're getting a consistent product from that. As Councillor Paulson has pointed out, that the people in the community know what to expect, and as a result, I suspect he is correct that some of the people that have elected not to cooperate with the bylaws have moved out to other areas. Our detachment covers the city of Port Alberni and down to Bamfield and other areas within the ACRD. And you know, once you're outside of the city limits, the bylaws are no longer in effect. But we're really not seeing the same issues that are apparently occurring down in the Kennedy Lakes area. We'll be continuing to work with our bylaws to look after our issues in the downtown area, but should there be issues of illegal camping or excessive camping, overstays in the provincial or national parks areas of the ACRD that are within our detachment area, we'll be partnering with the agencies that have the authority to enforce the statutes there.
All right, thank you, Sergeant. Inspector Rochette, do you have anything to add?
I just want to add a comment. That's what we're trying to do, and have done in the past too. We try to work with different stakeholders as well. So we've had in the past patrols working with conservation officers, Department of Fisheries officers as well. So we're going to reestablish those. I know we have something, we're trying to organize something for April, and so trying to work together, especially in rural areas for us, which is a bit more difficult to police and patrol. So trying, in that sense, increase the number of officers available. And the other thing too, I want to encourage is, especially I'm talking obviously about the Port Alberni RCMP area, if there's any illegal camping that's witnessed or is causing any issues, to report it to us. And then we can have conversation about how to address the issues, if it's an ongoing issue or if it's something that can be resolved quickly. Not to wait until it's escalate into a confrontation between locals and people illegally camping. So, and if there's any question in regards to how do you want to approach a person, or if you want assistance to keep the peace, something like that, please contact the detachment. The non-emergency line is fine, and we can just go from there, have a conversation how to best approach the issue in question.
So would that be accompanying, say, like a bylaw enforcement officer in the event that something happens, like a tearing up of the ticket or a threat, I suppose? That could be something that could be coordinated, but it sounds like a stretch on your resources as well. Is that something that you can do without affecting other services?
Well, exactly. Like, obviously, it would have an impact on other services, but if it's obviously, we try to prevent escalation. So, to wait until something escalates to a criminal code incident, really it's not an appropriate way to deal with our staffing issues and whatever else, right? So if we can resolve the problem from the get-go at the lowest level possible, that's what we're going to try to do. But I agree that obviously there's certain things that because of the size of our territory and the amount of members we have on shift, that's why I'm trying to work with other agencies and trying to work together and have a common approach and try to prevent. Obviously, prevention is the best way to manage all that. I obviously what's I've witnessed here, and like Sergeant Dion mentioned, is nothing compared to what I've heard so far, especially when you look at the West Coast.
Yeah.
But obviously, I think we have to be realistic that if any work is done on Main Road or any pushback, these people would relocate. So where are they going to relocate? And so we're going to need to have some kind of strategy as far as like suddenly they relocate towards Sprott Lake. Okay, well then what are we going to do in regards to that? So I think it's important. That's why I'm glad you invited us to be part of this.
Yeah.
Obviously, it appeared more to be a West Coast issue at this point, but I think it's important that whatever is decided to do, that we're part of it so we can prepare to come up with a solution that won't make things worse for us and better for Ucluelet, right? Trying to find a solution that'll be work for all of us and make sure that people want to enjoy the West Coast can do it safely.
If I could just add a comment as well. This is, the RCMP has what's called our prime records keeping system of calls for service. And that's why it's so important that other agencies that are encountering issues in these backcountry areas report it to the RCMP, because those incidents will be searchable over the entire Vancouver Island area. So it prevents people from being in silos, that they move out of the Port Alberni area over towards Ucluelet, and that they're not getting the attention because they don't have bylaws officers that are approaching them there. But if our other partner agencies such as Parks and Ministry of Forests are seeing these things, if they're reporting them, providing names when possible, or license plates, there can be an information file open up so that we're able to see if there's a pattern of behavior between people or people associated to a vehicle.
I think that's important to note, and I don't want to saddle the RCMP with too much, but I do know that your record keeping is pretty impeccable when it comes to calls for service, as well as kind of noting those kind of patterns. And if we can add more data points for the entire region by having other agencies either report what's happened, or if there's a request for lack of a better term, backup, those kind of things sound like that they would be noted and can be used as evidence in the future to present a case for more resources or more coordination, or both. Would you say that?
I think that'd be a good starting point for a resource improvement.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. I have been reminded, Director Paulson, before I get to you, that Ms. Thorogood, Galen Thorogood, wanted to chime in, and I missed the chat, and I apologize. And then we'll go right to Ron, and then probably Steve and Colin from Mosaic afterwards.
That's okay. The RCMP is more important. No, actually, I just wanted to echo Mayor Minion's and Councillor Paulson's comments about the city and the camping here, because it's not permitted at all within the city limits. And so we're often chasing campers, RVs around. We do have a difference though between the campers and RVs, and you pointed that out. We have homeless campers in, say, Dry Creek Park, but then we have the RVs who typically are doing illegal activity out of those RVs. They're not so-called homeless. They're choosing to be there. They want to do that. And then I think sometimes we do push them out of the area once they've been talked to by bylaw and RCMP, and then they go into those, the ACRD or possibly Kennedy Lake area and come back again. They kind of do the boomerang, right? So this is great that we're going to be sharing some resources, some data, and having these talks, because these unauthorized campers are causing a problem. We've noticed an uptick in our number of calls from last year, previous between 2019 and 2020, and I expect that will continue this year. One thing I did expect happen, I thought might happen this year, was that with the closure of the border, that we would see more snowbirds actually coming out this way and maybe just parking wherever they desire, but we haven't really noticed that. which is kind of good because I was expecting that would be a little bit more of an issue. But again, yeah, we're working with the RCMP. We work close with the RCMP and other resources and ACRD with bylaw, sharing some stuff. But it'd be good to share and have a working group, like you said. Thank you.
It sounds like we're going to see a technical working group that would talk about sharing that kind of data and strategies for working the bureaucratic system. But also we would have a political working group that would help kind of have that top-down pressure for change that needs to happen. At least that's how I'm seeing it in my mind. Dr. Paulson, before we get to Mosaic, if you wanted to add anything.
No, I just wanted to refer, I noticed that Gayleen was on the call, so I wanted to hear from her. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I think both Steve and Colin are from Mosaic, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Good afternoon. So thanks for the invite for today. I'm a new land use forester with Mosaic since November. Yeah, this is a really interesting, complicated issue, of course, sad with COVID and on top of all that, homelessness and mental health issues and challenges and a lot of different pieces to this. You know, from our perspective, there are challenges around safety and managing the environment and especially garbage and liability with our lands. Just some background information around Mosaic. So we do have 12 campgrounds on our private managed forest lands, which you know, are will be beginning to open, so that may help the scenario depending on the geography. We have access agreements with certain community groups, so that at times can come into play. But for some of our real critical areas and in managing safety for our operations, for the public, for our contractors, we do have gates and security. So those can be tools in the toolbox, and those can help with managing or reducing liabilities around garbage. But just 3 challenging examples. I know the West Main's been talked about a lot on the call. We do have some private managed forest land in that area. Second area, and I think it was touched on at least once or twice, is Great Central Lake and Boot Lagoon. There's currently some challenges there, not just from basic camping or RV type of scenario, but I think more squatters and garbage and other things happening there. And so I know different groups are involved with that, but at the end of the day, it really does come down to resources. And I know CNE, of course, is on the call, and natural resource officers and the RCMP. So the resources are a real critical part here. One more thing I just wanted to mention for us, we have a massive land base, private managed forest land. We do have some tenures on Northern Vancouver Island. And one of the general things with camping and illegal activity is forest protection and the wildfire risk that comes along with all the illegal activities. So that's something that's an important piece for us. I don't know, Steve, if you have anything to add to that or build from that, or if there's any questions.
No, I think you covered it off quite well. It is a massive land base. West Main is one area of concern, but we have multiple squatting encampment issues, and they're all slightly different people. So we have to approach each situation individually. So a very complicated issue.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think that brings us to the next item, and it's, my list says Weyerhaeuser, but I'm going to assume that means Western.
Nope.
No, it's Weyerhaeuser?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Samantha Turner, and I'm our senior real estate manager with Weyerhaeuser. And I'm out of Seattle, and our ownership that we have out there at Boot Lagoon is a site that was inherited through a merger or acquisition. So essentially kind of an orphaned site over the years. And I understand it presents some challenges, that there is an encampment out there. And I know recently Mosaic has reached out to our another Canadian representative from Weyerhaeuser to see if there's a way that we might be able to partner together. So possibly Steve and Colin, we could connect offline and discuss some of the ideas that you guys have presented. The challenge we have is that we don't have personnel out there. I am from the lower 48, so understanding the laws with RCMP and how to trespass folks off of property is not something, we're familiar with. We don't have operations up on the island anymore. Mm-hmm. So appreciate being invited to this and the conversation, and look forward to trying to partner with other folks in the RCMP on how we can resolve this, and hopefully eventually get the site back into some form of productive use with another company. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Samantha. Sorry, I had assumed that almost everything had been taken over already.
Yep,
yeah.
This one's an oddball left.
My father was a follower, and he retired when Weyerhaeuser was operating. So
okay,
it was just interesting to see the name here. But thank you for connecting in, and hopefully we can keep you connected to anything we may be doing in regards to a working group or whatnot. But I welcome any work you'd be doing with Mosaic as well. Okay, I've been informed that we don't have anyone from Interfor. However, we do have. I believe Steve Yancey from Transportation is an attendee. Oh, no, he's not. He's here now. Great. So is it Steve or Stefan?
Yes, no, it's Stefan Yancey. And
my apologies.
Yeah, representing Ministry of Transportation on this. So I guess, we have a bit of a different experience with the camping and illegal camping. So we didn't have too much out on the West Coast. And I think that's usually due to most of the camping or the illegal camping that we see is off highway within like our rest areas and our gravel pits. That's where we typically deal with illegal camping. And I think that's essentially because the highway is a very visible spot for folks to camp. And so when our maintenance contractor is going through and doing their regular patrols, they usually identify those areas where folks are camping, and then we have provisions under the Transportation Act and the Motor Vehicle Act that we can use to I guess evict or move those folks along. So we don't have a lot of we didn't have any issues last year. The only one I can really think of was at our Taylor River rest area. There was a couple of folks with RVs camping in there, but we were able to get them shuffled along fairly quickly. But that said, there are areas, unconstructed road rights of way, where we do also see folks going out and camping on them. And usually that takes somebody to call in and complain or police notice it or something. And then we do have provisions where we can go in there and remove the illegal camping on those. So as far as whether the park's open, I mean, it's not really going to affect us other than it may stop a few of the folks from camping in rest areas and whatnot, but I don't think that that's going to be a big impact, or there's enough of those campers to really notice an impact on that. So yeah, that's our experience.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that, though. It is important to involve you because of some of what you've already stated. Next up, I have the Ministry of Environment. I've been told Andrew Riddell is the individual. Are you on?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Great, thanks for having me. The Conservation Officer Service, just a little bit of a background. In the central Vancouver Island, our area of service goes from Ladysmith to Bowser, and you pretty much draw a straight line across the island for areas of service for calls. And in that area, we have 5 full-time officers. So the problem that we have been encountering with the camping problem is the amount of garbage that's being left behind, the littering, but when it comes to the follow-up that's required in responding to complaints that we receive, we aren't getting to the complaints when these campers are still on the back roads. We're getting there roughly 2 to 3 days afterwards, and then have nobody typically to follow up with. The other problem is the RVs who are discharging their gray and black water to the ditches, and which I would likely guess to the rivers and lakes as well in the areas where they're camping. At the onset of COVID last year, we all were deployed all over the province for different matters. So we weren't able to do any proactive patrols for the camping issue until the tail end of the camping season. By that time, I'd say probably 90% of these campers out on the West Main had all disappeared. And for the most part, the folks that we did speak to, though, I started to find out quite quickly that they know the law around camping on Crown land, 14 days, and they were trying to use that to their advantage. And they were actually, some of them, keeping good track records of just exactly where they had been moving to, if they had been given any sort of eviction orders by whichever law enforcement agency. So, the problem for the CO service is the follow-up that's required to hold these people accountable for all the litter and garbage that's being left behind. And then obviously the proactive patrols. It's difficult to know the area just exactly where they are, just such a vast region that we need to patrol. And I would just also like to note that, to echo Parks Canada, they made a comment about the amount of garbage being left behind for human wildlife interactions. We haven't received many calls about that on Crown land, but I would like to think that there's certainly going to be food conditioning that is occurring with our wildlife in these back areas that isn't being reported clearly to us, which is a concern when most of these users on these back roads don't have the back sort of country experience in managing and protecting themselves with wildlife. So that's certainly a concern for the CO service going into the summer months.
Thank you. I have a toddler playing the piano behind me that I can't really do much about at the moment, but thank you for that update. I think the environmental impacts there are something that needs to be noted, and thank you. My wife is outside picking up our daughter from the bus stop, so I guess there's not a lot I can do about it. Next up, are there any representatives from the MLA's office?
Hi, yes. My name is Andrea. I'm MLA Osborne's constituency assistant. Unfortunately, she was unable to attend today as she's in the legislature, but we're here really just to listen and assist where we can. So I won't take too much time.
Okay, thank you for that. I do think that we're going to collate and put together kind of the lessons learned and information in context and probably present that to the MLA. So before we get to other directors,
Did we miss Kuas?
Oh, they weren't able to attend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Say hi to everyone. Hi, everyone. Are there anyone from other agencies who have yet to speak? All right, hearing none. What I thought I'd do is I'd go in order.
John.
Oh,
sorry,
yes.
John. It's
Please,
Karen.
please go ahead.
Just one thing, I did not realize my law enforcement supervisor is on, John Hopkins, and I think he wanted to add a few things.
Please go ahead. If you are online, please add anything you can.
John, are you there?
Yeah, hey, it's John Hopkins here. Yeah, no, I guess just a couple of things we wanted to add, I guess, was just the shared responsibility, and that we know that we've had an uptick in illegal camping and all the associated activities that accompany that everyone else has discussed. But what we know is by the impact that we have by keeping them out of the Nash Park Reserve through, enforcement action, infrastructure such as gating our day use areas in the evenings during the busiest times of the year. We know that we are pushing the problem to the jurisdictions surrounding the park, which in turn impacts us again as well. So I just think that, yeah, we can add to the working group and ensuring that, whether it be, I know that like Sergeant Mancini suggested, there's been discussions of gates on various roads, but I think it's a human factor too that has to be involved, so that you have someone there to ensure that the gates are there for a reason, that the rules are being followed. And I know that's a lot of commitment from all the different jurisdictions, but maybe together we can come up with something. Because we'll have an impact in one area and that'll just filter it into others. So I think the working group would be a good idea.
All right, thank you for that. Once again, before we get to the EA directors, are there any other agencies you'd like to speak? So I would note that we missed a few First Nations, and CUIS was not able to attend, but we will involve them in the future if possible. Okay, well, my original plan was to finish off the roundtable with the EA directors in order, like A, B, C, and so on and so forth. So I'm wondering, but beforehand, if we want to go to our vice chair, Director McNabb, did you have anything to add first?
Yes, I mean, the area of Beaver Creek, this hasn't become, the illegal camping portion of it hasn't become an issue. But I absolutely agree that if we use the process of moving them out of one area, they're going to go to another. So I don't think that that's beneficial. We need to really strategize the problem and understand what the overall impacts of our enforcement are going to be, and be ready for that impact. So I, certainly am very sympathetic to the issues of the West Coast on this, and the issues of Great Central Lake. But these issues could easily be Beaver Creek, they could be Cherry Creek, they could be Banfield, and maybe they are Banfield. I haven't heard from Bob on that yet, but so yeah, I look forward to finding solutions. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So we'll go in order, or the remaining order now. So we'll start with Director Beckett and then on to Director Shannon. Director Beckett, Banfield, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any specific challenges that we're seeing in Banfield, and I don't know about Anakla. My concern regionally is not just the enforcement aspect or the bylaw aspect, but it's the entire mental health and substance abuse resources that are required to help address the challenges that we're seeing throughout the province. So I don't have an answer for that, of course, but I think that we need to talk to MLA Osborne, Minister Osborne, as we are on Friday, and raise this issue, because this is not going away. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that. And just on our end, Kuwait's had a few unauthorized campers in our territory, but we have some pretty active patrolling. And for the most part, our signage has helped with kind of curtailing the real aggressive conversations. At least I haven't heard any in the past year. It has happened in the past, but more than a year ago. I think it's important to note that the mental health and addictions has been kind of a common theme across a lot of these conversations, when it wasn't just campers wanting to camp in on the West Coast. That the homelessness issue and the mental health issue is something that I don't think this is just a municipal minister issue. I think this is a Sheila Malcolmson kind of conversation as well. So any conversations that we have, we should probably copy her on what's going on there, because I think a lot of the preventative measures will be very important, and all we can do is lobby. But I think I can say that the RCMP would probably very much like to see a lot more investment in mental health and substance abuse on a preventative and a treatment side, so that they're not the ones on the front lines always having to deal with that. And I think that's a better use of resources. We'll now turn to Director Shannon from Beaufort. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation we've had so far. Beaufort is, I would say, if there's with little camping issue, I would call that we have, I would say it's more recreational camping versus homelessness in long term. But as I'm talking about this, I do want to acknowledge, as it's been touched on, Director Paulson's comment about, as Director McNabb mentioned too, that if we're pushing people out of one area, it's easy to move into the next. So I really appreciate that being brought up. What I have heard or seen in regards to camping in Beaufort area, more in the north end, so like the end of Beaver Creek Road versus closer to Cherry Creek, is if the gates are locked towards Ash Main at the end of the road, is people are either stuck on the gravel road side of it and can't get back out, or they've wanted to go out camping and the gate was locked, so they've just stayed the night at the end of the road. But I'm really hoping with the announcement that was made yesterday, as we work together with Mosaic and the province, opening up or working towards access towards a lot of the areas that we do have out in this area, out Ash, where all the lakes and parks and stuff are, that hopefully once we can move towards some solutions there, it might even help alleviate some of this illegal camping, because people can get back to the spots, especially locals, where there used to be camping access all the time. And then I guess if we look at reopening a provincial campsite, so Stamp Falls Provincial Park is in Beaufort. And I've seen a few times, and we've experienced it on our farm, where if, and it's mostly we have found like out of country, so that might be not so much an issue this year, but out of country European or out of province campers, if they've gone to Stamp Falls and it's full, if they're coming in the evening and there's really nowhere else to go, they'll either park at the Beaver Creek Community Hall for the night, not usually two because there's not much there, or we've run into people early in the morning going down to the barns on the property, because that's where they just decided to park. It was dark out. It looked like it was a gravel road and they just parked there. Most people, there hasn't been a lot of confrontation with that stuff. It's more of a, sorry, we're leaving. There was nowhere else to go. But it can be a safety concern in the summertime when farming is more active, when there's silaging and haying going on. Going back to Stamp Falls itself, if we're talking about trails, the Anglers Trail runs along in the park there, and Money's Pool is at the far end off Comox Trail. I don't think there's much for camping that I've heard of back there, because it's a little rough getting in there. But other than that, I don't think that would be the extent that I can see for camping in our area. For the most part, I think it's more what we see too. We've talked about people leaving garbage and dumping from camping. I think we're seeing that without the camping part out here. If people are just, again, going back to the conversation of maybe not wanting to use the dump, or it's quickly to drive it out there, where we've had issues where there's furniture and stuff dumped on people's private properties. But that would be all I have to contribute, in addition to what everybody has said already. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next up, I have Director Roberts from Long Beach, and then we'll go to Director Cote.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. Well, I don't know where to start, but I think I've heard most of it from everybody already out there. If you gate it, it'll push them out to someplace else. And I know that we've had, not only on West Main, but we've also had issues down towards the Maggie Lake, Tocourt Bay area, the camping down there, and every little quarry and pull out on the side. It's you know, as has been mentioned, they are allowed 2 weeks, but a lot of this is Indigenous land. It belongs to the Toquat Nation, and the concern from my perspective as the regional director, hearing comments from people about West Main, and it's the mess, the environmental concerns, and so on and so forth. And I think the crux of it for a lot of us is to keep an eye out and to report as was recommended by the RCMP. And if there's issues about environmental concerns on Crown land, that we let the COs know what's going on so that they can enforce it through Ministry of Environment. I know that some of the private companies, such as, well, it was Island Timberlands and Timber West, had their own security people, and I don't know if that is now being maintained by Mosaic or not. But for them to keep an eye on what's going out and report on, I really appreciate the concern by BC Parks, people going out there and being mobbed, which is totally ridiculous. The lands that have been mentioned up around Great Central Lake, where there's been people living there, really, it's not camping. It's gotten beyond just that. I guess this behooves all of us to be involved, and I know that the RCMP and COs and private companies are looking forward to forming a working group. And I think that's extremely important, that we could come up with a better plan, or a plan to try to deal with these people that are encroaching on our lands, the First Nations communities, and to the properties that on the West Coast that we hold dear, that we are so concerned about, the environmental impacts that occur there. And it's one thing to camp in a place and then pick up after yourself, as I've heard some, but the balance of it, the environmental impact with regards to garbage left, human waste, and the potential for conflict between humans and wildlife is really an important issue as well. So I don't think I can add too much more than that. And I appreciate everybody's input into this, and it's time. I know that we'll be discussing some of this with our MLA on Friday. Extremely important issues, and I don't have an answer other than to be watchful, and hopefully we can come up with some serious enforcement action to deal with it and dissuade people from coming here that have no good intention of being here, but just to abuse the land that we so love. Anyway, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Director Roberts. I'm going to pause before we get to Director Cote. There was a direct mention of Mosaic, and Colin or Steve, did you want to chime in? Or I think it had to do with directly security concerns, if you had any, or if you had security folks still working.
Yeah, so I can answer that. And so since the affiliation with Mosaic managing Island Timberlands and Timber West, we have taken over security for both of those companies, and we do manage it. So there are security providers right across our land base.
All right. Were there any other comments, Colin? No? All right. Thank you. Director Cote, if you will.
Thank you. I just want to say I so appreciate everybody that's attending today and sharing all of your concerns. It's important that we address this as a group rather than pushing the problem off from one area to another. Sprout Lake has been an area of concern. I get calls from my constituents on a regular basis regarding camping, illegal camping, unauthorized camping, however you would like to call it. There's been 4 major sites that I'm aware of. The one out at Great Central Lake at Boot Lagoon, and another one, another established campsite out at Great Central, I believe on Mosaic's property. I have been in conversation with Samantha Turner, who I'm really pleased to see that was attending today's meeting from Weyerhaeuser. And hopefully they can work with Mosaic on some kind of strategy to remove the campers that are
illegally occupying that property out at Boot Lagoon. Just want to say that the people that live out in that area are very concerned. There's also a fish hatchery that's right there. The campsite is one that people have chosen to live there. I'm not sure if they came from the city or where they came from, but there's campers, there's trucks. There is no facilities there. So where is their waste going and their garbage? It is piling up. We'd really like to assure that people have a place to live for homeless people. There is a huge difference between those people who are illegally camping that choose that as opposed to someone who is truly homeless. In my opinion, someone who is homeless and is trying to remedy that needs those supports, and they are available within the city. And I'd really like to see the ACRD working with the city of Port Alberni and Tofino and Ucluelet on providing those supports as we move forward. So we're not alone. This problem is everywhere. The campers that are living out at Great Central Lake they may not have a place that they're calling home, but I don't believe that they have the needs that some homeless people have. There's taxis running out to Great Central Lake all hours of the night. They are still there. We had a community meeting Monday night, and there's the Sprout Lake Parks Commission chair went out to the boat launch to take a look at that area and made note of the campers that are at Boot Lagoon. Also, the president of the community association also ran out there and took a look and made note of the campers and the vehicles and the garbage. We addressing this, and I know that the RCMP have asked them to leave, but where are they going to go? So really want to make sure that it's not just to the next site. We need to address this in a way that there's going to be provisions for people so that they're not taking advantage of the environment and really doing great harm to our communities and to our environment. I keep thinking about Coombs and how it was not that long ago where there was an incident there where someone died and there was a fire. So I'm not sure how that escalated to that extent, but I do not want that to happen in our community. It does not need to happen if we can get together and find some solutions and address this. And hopefully we can get some assistance from our MLA and all the parties that are addressed here today. Just like to see us come together and find some solutions. And I think that's about all I have to say today. Just like to thank us all, and we are all one, and we want to protect our land. We want to protect our people and the people who have to address this. We are also want to point out that we are doing a homeless or a housing study within the ACRD, including in alignment with the City of Port Alberni and the West Coast, Tofino, Ucluelet, and the First Nations. So I did attend one meeting already regarding this and did mention homelessness is not just housing. So thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Director Cote. All right, that brings us to Director Bodnar, Cherry Creek.
Thank you. I haven't seen or heard any illegal camping around around Cherry Creek. However, the trail, the log train trail has been very busy, and there is extra garbage around there. I walk those trails quite often, and I haven't seen or heard anything other than more traffic and people not being aware of the garbage that they are throwing around there. The other thing I was going to mention about West Main and around Kennedy Lake, thinking outside the box, would it be possible or reasonable to think about having, if there is so much camping that's needed, to perhaps put in the park at Kennedy Lake or other areas that could have legal camping? And also, if we work as a whole here, all the stakeholders, would it be possible, or would it be even helpful to maybe do some advertising and saying that this, people will be fined? I don't think you're going to get rid of the aggressive ones. They seem to be there regardless. But maybe there was other campers, if they are aware of that, would that deter them? So thank you. That's just what I wanted to say.
All right, thank you very much, Director Bodner. Okay, so I'm just gonna recap from my perspective where I think we're going, and then I'd like to call on maybe our CAO, Douglas Holmes, to call on any of his senior managers to add to the group. And then from there, I think we'll have a quick discussion about what we'll do in the follow-up, because we're hitting about an hour and a half now, and usually that's getting to bio break time and people starting to zone out time. I've been trying to take as many extensive notes as possible, and I am noting that there's a lot of things that are common across everyone who's reported an impact. So these are impacts that are both health and safety and environmental in nature. And these are things that we need to be able to measure so that we can have an understanding of those impacts in specific instances, but also across time. Those cumulative impacts will be quite important. When I say cumulative impacts, it's usually noted in an environmental sense of the word, but we can do so from a health and safety perspective, and perhaps even a socioeconomic one. So we need to measure the problem. Second of all, we need to understand what it would take to actually cover measuring the problem and responding to issues in a way that suits what we have. There's a gap there. We need to identify what it is and understand what we may do in the process to change how we do things or how we work with one another to create solutions that could reduce those costs or increase efficacy, or both. And then lastly, we need to look at what kind of policies, either at our level or the provincial level, that may need to change in regards to how we can work together, how we can address those issues, or more importantly, how we can get more resources sent this way. Because it seems like Vancouver Island as a whole, our region especially, has hit a threshold of both a number of people, a level of notoriety in regards to marketing our land and our territory, and that level of interest generally has not kept up with our ability to keep up with the impacts of people visiting, either especially in the ways that are happening illegally. Those illegal impacts are probably much higher than the legal ones. And that kind of begs the question of where can we find the resources to deal with this, and exactly what is the gap in both time, manpower, money. So I'd like to welcome our CAO, Douglas Holmes. If you want to take over and perhaps provide some feedback or overview, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think you've done a very good job in terms of providing an overview and a summary. Janice has been taking very detailed notes, and I've captured some high spots, I think as many of us have as well. We do have a meeting, as noted in the agenda, coming up with our MLA on Friday, and hearing from Minister Osborne with respect to the conversations that have happened so far, I think will be very, very important. Clearly, this is conversation that is the intersection of all kinds of issues with respect to mental health and addiction, or people experiencing homelessness, or both of those things, or people just with time on their hands and who want to come from other places and just recreate in a way that they want to, that is causing some of the issues that really aren't acceptable from an environmental point of view, or from an interaction point of view with other people or with industry, and all of the other matters that have been talked about. The idea of a working group, I think, sounds very positive. The theme of chasing groups or individuals around from place to place to place is one that I think needs to stay near the fore, because if we start talking about, for example, creating bylaws, or start actively enforcing the 14-day limit on Crown land, or the no stay overnights at Kennedy Lake, for example, all of those things, do we just end up then with this like a merry-go-round, where we just go around and chase the same people from place to place? And I'm thinking very much that the foundational problems that we have with respect to places for people experiencing mental illness, for the underlying causes of addiction, the assistance for people who are in the unfortunate situation of having both of those matters in their lives. I'm wondering if there's more fundamental questions really need to be the focus. And because in the absence of those things, we would just have a litter problem, and maybe and a bit of a gray water and black water problem, and belligerent people who really have no excuse for being belligerent. So I think that we need to keep this conversation going. And I think striking a task force to continue the conversation shortly after our conversation with the MLA. And I'll ask Andrea perhaps to see if there's anything that we can hear from our MLA with respect to what is happening for resources with respect to people experiencing homelessness, and for provincially provided resources for people who have mental illness and addiction problems. If there's anything new that we can hear and fold into this conversation. I do note that, for example, there is some grant funding available for programs maybe, or activities that would seem to continue the conversation or address some of the symptoms of this. But I think we want to go deeper than symptomatic. And particularly when we think about the conversation, the presentation, part of this presentation from Mayor Minions, for example, I think we really need to get to those fundamentals. Anyway, Mr. Chair, I think I would leave it at that, and look forward to any direction that may come out of the committee, or including following Friday's meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm thinking we may want to wait until after Friday's meeting, but I do think that we should have a conversation now with the stakeholders about their willingness to participate in some sort of working group or pair, right? So I do make a differentiation between the political work and the technical work, although they should be kind of steered together and coordinated. So when it comes time for identifying the impacts and measuring them, I think that's a lot of that is going to be technical work. However, that's going to specifically fit into any arguments we may make to the government in regards to looking for resources, looking for solutions, and coordinating prevention. So when I think of the impacts, yeah, garbage, waste, black and gray water, all these things are actual issues that can be prevented or mitigated. I think there's an issue here that has to do with communication as well. If we're able to communicate clearly to people who are heading down West Main or heading into Tokewater Ho-Chucklesett territory, that they know very well that you're entering these lands and they're not for camping with an express permission, or they're just not in general, as was noted by, I think Mike said that. And that communication matters, and I think that matters early on so that people coming into the territory know. So I don't want to miss something that was stated, and I think there's a lot of once again, I think it was Mike who was saying it, apps and blogs. So I think it may take some time, but we should identify the places where our lands are identified as being safe for camping on the cheap. And there are ways to find it, because it's pretty brazen online when it comes to things like this. And if we're able to contact those organizations or companies that are running the apps to take those things down or add more information, then that would help immensely, I think, especially in dissuading Alberta travelers or Quebec travelers or Ontario travelers who just have no understanding of the Vancouver Island experience and Crown Land in the same way. Then that will hopefully help mitigate some of it, at least at the very start. I think what I would suggest is that we definitely recommend to the board now that a working group that involves the entire region be created, that involves folks from as many organizations as we can put together, but maybe would be organized and chaired from the ACRD perspective. And the reason why I think it should be the entire region rather than West Coast and Valley is because of that specific issue that Director Paulson has stated, that if there's a lot of activity in the Valley, could that drive that out to the West Coast or vice versa? And we need to be acutely aware of the impacts that a conversation and activity on Hwayet territory could have an impact, not only on Bamfield, but on the Alberni Valley or even beyond, because there's family in Hochucklasset, right? So with that in mind, I do think that we should strike some sort of organized approach to this. And then once we get to that area, once we get to that meeting, then we bust out the technical and bust out the political activities and go from there. But I'm more than open to whatever the directors or anyone may put together. Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So I would move, sorry, no, I'm on. I would move that that we recommend to the ACRD board that we form a strategic management group for looking for solutions to the problems of illegal camping and illegal residents on Crown and other lands. And that would be it. Thanks.
Okay. How about just in the region? That'll cover all the lands, I think, because I think we're going to need to coordinate what First Nations with treaties will need to do as well.
Well, yeah, I think based on our participant list that we have today.
Okay.
Then we can go from there. We may find others that are interested.
Yeah, I think this is definitely an open call. Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director, everyone. Director Beckett, any further comments? All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, so what I'll do is have one last call for any other comments from directors or other stakeholders who spoke early and still want to add something. Director Paulson, please go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of our friends south of the border with Weyerhaeuser.
Yeah.
And that we offer, in the absence of really having anybody on the ground here, that we reach out and help in any way that we can with, in particular, the property out of Great Central Lake. And the other thing that I'm just sitting here thinking about is for every situation like this where you kind of have people camping, people who are vulnerable, you have people that take advantage of them. And there is definitely illegal activity surrounding this where people are taking advantage. Some of the disadvantaged have more money than they've had recently to CERB or other extended benefits. So there's people in there selling them drugs and doing other illegal activity, taking advantage of those people. We kind of need to be aware of that illegal side of things. And that may be where you wind up with the bullies or people who may have firearms in their possession, because they're making a big buck out of this too.
Yeah. From that kind of strategic decision-making process, we need to make sure that Samantha is kept in the loop, especially since Boot Lagoon seems to be a hotspot and a long-standing one. And when we get to the tactical level of what we're actually going to do, I think it's super important that we do involve the RCMP in what we hope to achieve, but also the conservation officers as well, so that there's some coordination there. So once we have the owner, we have government, we have the enforcement agencies involved, that will hopefully help us mitigate or prevent, mitigate, and hopefully correct the issues as they come about. Just for background, Samantha, yeah, you will go next. Our regional district's a lot like a county government, a county board, and there's fewer jurisdictional issues though, because our law enforcement is national in nature. So how they get paid is different, but their enforcement jurisdiction is basically all of Canada. And BC conservation officers, they have the ability to go into all lands except for treaty lands without express permission. So their jurisdiction issues aren't really an issue. We're hoping to invite you, or at least keep you in the loop as to what's going on. But please go ahead.
And I was just going to offer that on behalf of Weyerhaeuser, if there is a tactical or strategic group put together specifically to address this kind of as a collective at the Boot Lagoon, Port Alberni specifically, happy to be involved in that. So Director Paulson, if that's something that somebody is spearheading from your end, happy to have Weyerhaeuser and myself participate in that.
Okay. So we'll keep you updated as to the information once it comes out in regards to any scheduling of meetings, but we'll definitely keep you up to date in regards to any minutes and conversations when we specifically start talking about the Boot Lagoon. Mike, I noticed that you went on with video on, so if you wanted to chime in, please go ahead.
I was just going to add that we have been coordinating on some of these issues with the agencies that are involved, and certainly would continue to do that. And you know, so some of our staff being involved in a working group would probably be a good idea.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to make sure that I just wanted to make sure that the directors were aware that we have been working on that end as well. Working with the property owners and other people impacted.
Okay, so that's important to note, and the coordination has occurred and information exchange has occurred and will continue. I think the important part here is that we're making this more of a public process, and I think that aspect of communications between each other, but also just in front of the public, is part of the importance of what's going on here. I think once again, I'll ask if anybody else has anything they'd like to add to the conversation. And with that, I don't see that we have any late business. I would note that we do have one individual who attended the whole meeting, and I'm wondering if Mr. Yudes has any questions or comments that were sent in via email or through the Q&A process. So is that Janice, or were there any conversations there?
No, there were no questions or comments from any of the public.
Okay, but I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And I think the last bit we'll be doing now is adjournment. Would anyone like to move to adjourn? Thank you, Dr. McNabb, seconded by Director Beckett, by everyone. Once again, thank you for coming. And we will be in contact once more as things arise. All right, feel better, Director Cole. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
And thank you, everyone, and have a good day. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you and have a great day. Thanks for coming.